You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, and this is an extended edition. We have some 30 minutes more so that we can deal with the other, issue about whether or not our government has been dishonest and insincere with us when it comes to the economic figures. Right. So Kwarteng is back, as I indicated to you earlier, and then John Jinapo is still here. Joining us live via Zoom is Albert Tona Mama, IMF Country Representative. And as you have followed the situation so far, there is the claim, or the figures as you can see them, have been bandied about as that the government of Ghana has been telling us different macroeconomic figures locally, and then in approaching the IMF for the funds that it has gotten from the COVID, it used completely different figures that also suggest that the economic situation is not as good as we have been told back at home. There has been some explanations going on. Let's begin with the IMF's country director. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, Samson. Good afternoon to your panelists.
Right. So I'm sure that you have followed this back and forth as a result of the two contrasting figures, and also the Ghana, Fact Check Ghana has done and confirmed that in fact there were different figures submitted at home and different figures submitted to the IMF. What's the explanation?
First, let me commend you for reaching out. I think that's the right thing to do. We try as much as possible to stay out of these public debates. I think we felt compelled here to accept the call from the Newsfile just to clarify a statement made by Fact Check Ghana,
right,
which seems to be a Twitter accredited account. They basically say, and I quote, the data presented by the government to the IMF are different from those in budget statement, end quote. And here I would just like to focus on two metrics, the fiscal deficit and the gross international reserve. In our report, we present, if I start with the fiscal deficit, we present two measures of the fiscal deficit, with and without financial sector cost and energy sector payments. It appears that the number that are making the rounds, and excuse me if I've not been able to follow, because as much as this has been an important debate, there are really more serious things taking place that are taking up our time, right? So let me just make that point clear.
Right.
So we present the deficit with and without financial sector payments and energy sector payments. So the comparison that I see making the round is comparing two different things on one side, and we are aware of these differences, right? They are not new. I think that we can agree to disagree on the way to capture it, but I think there is really no new information here. So that's the first statement. So it's important to compare similar things. At least for us at the fund, we are aware and we receive this data. So that's the first thing. When it comes to gross international reserves, there again, we have our definition, a definition that we think is the right one. But Bank of Ghana also has a different understanding of what gross international reserve should account for. And the difference here is that Bank of Ghana counts the oil funds, right? The Heritage Fund and the Stabilization Fund as part of gross international reserve. And I think that point was clearly made at the beginning of the year by the governor of the Central Bank of Ghana, that that's the difference and that's the position that they are taking. So to me, that's the clarification that I wanted to make.
Great.
For the debate about whether or not the government is messaging the data, I believe that Honorable Kwarteng is a spokesperson and can take that up. But when it comes to the data that we've received and what we've worked with, in this debate, there's really nothing new that we did not know about. Thank you.
Okay. So just a little bit of a clarity. As far as the fiscal deficit is concerned, what the Fact Check Ghana did was to show from the budget statement that in 2018 and 2019, the government reported to Ghanaians 3.0% 2018, 4.5% 2019, while the data from the IMF statement 2018, which was 3.0, turned 7.0, and then 2019, which was 4.5, turned 7.5. Your explanation is that you were not supplied statements by the government of Ghana that contained these figures. Is that what you're saying?
That's not correct. That's actually not what I'm saying.
All right.
What I'm saying is the 4.5 that you see, for example, in 2019,
right,
does not include financial sector payments and energy sector payment.
Right.
Our number includes these two elements, and we know well, and I think that's not new, we know why the government of Ghana made the decision not to have these two elements in the fiscal deficit. I think these are not new.
So the essence of my question to you is, this is what you generated, not statements submitted to you by the state government of Ghana.
That's correct.
Okay.
This is what we generated. This is our understanding of the fiscal deficit. That's correct.
Okay. And when it comes to the gross international reserves, your explanation is the same method.
It's the same method.
Right.
It's the same method.
Right.
We have. I mean, let me first, state that we work with a lot of countries, and we do have some, how can I say, statistical standard. We may well disagree. For example, if you take the gross international reserve, and I think that's, a point that, some people may agree to. I think the argument by Bank of Ghana is that, if push comes to shove and they need additional buffers, they can actually, if you are in a situation of crisis, you can go to Parliament and request access to the oil funds. What we say is that perhaps it's more complicated than that, but we can agree to disagree and present the numbers that we think are more aligned to comparison with other countries, because that's our objective.
All right. My final question to you will be, it is your preference that when the government of Ghana is putting its financial statements together, it will include financial sector payments and energy sector payments? That's your preference?
We don't need to have a preference. I think that, and that's something that is unfortunate, I believe, in this debate. A report comes, I mean, these tables are at the back of a report. When you go through these reports, all these discrepancies are discussed. And I believe that the budget statement also goes into this I hope so, these discrepancies. Okay. So you cannot go to a report at the end of the report and compare apple and pears. You need to go through the report and understand what are the figures that are being presented.
As far as you are concerned, as far as your institution is concerned, nothing wrong is done by the non-inclusion of the financial sector payment and the energy sector payments. That's what you say?
That's not necessarily what I'm saying, but let me go back to that. For example, during the program that expired in April 2019,
right,
when the issue of the financial sector came up, because initially in the design of the program, this is something that was not anticipated, right? And the program aimed to achieve some fiscal targets. A decision was made that, look, the financial sector really needed to be taken care of. And if you really want a true picture of the fiscal effort that the government is making, we need to strip out financial sector cost.
okay,
Because this is a necessary action so that you can generate growth, economic growth in the future. So we agreed on that, okay? On the financial sector costs, we agreed to put them aside and just measure the fiscal effort without financial sector cost.
all right.
Okay, so I think on the energy sector payment, that's a different matter. And I'll refer you to our report in December who goes into that.
All right.
Over.
Thank you very much. Albert Turner Mama, IMF Country Representative, thank you so very much for your intervention.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Okay, so we decided that we thought that the most effective way to settle this debate and to make progress was to get to the IMF itself. And this has been the IMF explanation. Let me begin with John. Are you settled in your mind now? Any confusions or misunderstandings that you had earlier? And I saw you, I saw Adongo and the rest of you, you know, banding this document about and charging the government for being dishonest and showing figures that do not reflect the correct status of the economy. Whilst, as you may say, it was deceiving Ghanaians back at home. When it comes to the gross international reserves, the budget statement here at home and presented to Parliament by the Finance Minister and repeated by all government functionaries was for 2018, 6,800, and for 2019, 8,100. Then you had, for what was reported by the IMF, for 2018, you had 5,317 as against 6,800. And then in 2019, 6,634 as against 8,100. So,
Samson, first of all, I'm sure everybody listened to the gentleman. He says that they disagree with government on the treatment. That's what he says.
Okay.
It's not me. So it's not like Jinapo Adongo says that there's contradiction. The IMF gentleman says that the way you are treating your gross reserves, we disagree. So let's put that in perspective. But even more importantly, there are two. There's the gross reserve and the net reserve. So let's assume that Bank of Ghana wants to treat the gross reserves, including petroleum flows. Why are the net reserves different? What accounts for the disparity between the net reserve quoted by the IMF and that quoted by government in the budget? Because the net reserves excludes all these, the stabilization and those things. So why is it different? And I would wish my brother to deal with that. Two has to do with the deficit. Deficit is simply what you incurred in terms of expenditure as against your revenues. When you run a deficit, it means that there's a shortfall in terms of monies that you need to meet a certain obligation. If you don't raise enough revenue to deal with that deficit, it goes to hit your debt. So the question is, what is Ghana's deficit overall? And the IMF, they chose their words carefully. They say overall deficit 7%. You see, overall balance. So it's like I owe 10 million, 7 million to Kwaku, 3 million to you, Samson. And I say that minus Samson's debt is 7 million. So the question is, what is the overall deficit for this year? Because you must pay for that. That deficit will not vanish. And based on our national accounting system, you must recognize that. So what the IMF gentleman is saying is that our overall deficit is 7%. But less the financial sector and energy sector is 4.7 or 3.7, depending on how you want to look. That's the fact.
How would you look at it if you were told that you are comparing in a very wrong way provisional figures for the first 3 quarters of the year with actual full year data reported by the IMF?
I've seen people write that, and they don't even understand what they're talking about. They should take time and learn. I'm talking of 2018 figures. I chose my base year carefully. I'm not talking of 2019 figures. I know very well that when the minister was presenting the budget, 2019 had not ended. But 2018, in April 2019, they bring the figures. Then in the media review, he revises the figures. So when he comes in November or so, 2019, then I'm certain that 2018 figures are accurate. I'm not dealing with 2019 figures. If I wanted to deal with 2019 figures, I would have dealt with them. And this is what he says in the budget. I refer to page 3, paragraph 15. If the minister, in reporting to Parliament and Ghana, has stated the two like the IMF states, then we can all be doing a proper analysis. Because the 4.5 or 4.7.
So let me come here.
Wait.
I just mixing up the
On the same point, I ask you, what is the practice, the standard practice? Usually, the budget statement is presented in November each year. Is that not so?
Certainly. I think before 18th, that's what the law says.
So that will cover data up to the 3rd quarter of the year.
Yes.
Is that not so?
Yes.
So what's
and it will report on the outturns of 2018.
No, that will come in the media review.
Please explain.
Please, look.
Wait, let him explain. Yeah.
To start with.
Okay, let me just read this, if it's true or not. The minister tells you that in 2019, we ran 4.7 against 3.7 of 2018. So what are you talking about?
Yes, quickly.
What's this?
Well, to start with, let me make this point, that the Ministry of Finance, we operate an open door policy. If people have issues with figures, first come, let us explain to you what has happened. Then if at all you still decide to go out, at least you'll be guided by the perspectives we have shared with you. What the Fact Check Ghana did, I understand they are part of a media foundation for West Africa. What they did was completely wrong, and I advise them to move away from this attitude of putting things that
so you
are not
mean
right. Now,
their interpretation may have been wrong.
They are wrong on several points.
But they got the figures. This is their interpretation.
Their figures are wrong too.
Okay. Go ahead. Let's listen
now,
to you.
Now, let's look at the statement.
They didn't generate any figures. So if you say their figures are wrong.
That's what I mean. Let me just... I go to their statement, and they said, below is a table comparing the data on the above-mentioned indicators, which are contained in page 24, paragraph 100 of the 2019 budget statement, and page 18.71 of the 2020 budget statement against the data from the IMF. Now, they then proceed, let's focus even on the 2019. So, in 2019, I went to the page 18, paragraph 71, and this is how it reads. And John, pay attention so that you can help them. Mr. Speaker, provisional data available on the performance of the economy as at the end of September 2019. This is what they are quoting. Show that the targets for most of the macroeconomic indicators have been realized. A summary of this performance is as follows. Then we produce the figures that the fact-check people have produced in their statement. And then they compare the 3 quarters to a statement issued by the IMF in April 2020, covering the entire 2019. 2019. So what I'm saying to John and fact check is that if they had come to the Minister of Finance and we had guided them that this is your error, they would definitely not have put this statement out. That's the first point. In the 2018, John, just pause and recollect this. When we bring budget statements, we report, because for instance, if you take the 2018 budget statement, that would be submitted to Parliament November 2017. So you give the first 3 quarters of 2017. If you want to know the real outturn for the full 2017, you go to the 2018 media review.
What's this?
So you're just confusing the issues.
Continue. I'll deal with that. What's this?
You go to
Ghana's balance of payment 2018 to 2019. This is the 2020 budget.
So what are you saying? What I'm telling you, if you pause and just listen, I'm saying that to get the outturn for, in fact, on this occasion they used 2018. You need to go to the 2019 media review, because at the time we're presenting the 2019 budget, we use the first 3 quarters. What they are doing is that they are taking the budget statements for 2018 and 2019. They did not, if they had used a media review, they will not be putting these figures out. That is the error. And if, John, they are in contact with you, just mention to them that this is not how it happened. But when I listen to you yourself, I get a sense that you're also mixing up the 3rd quarter figures with the, and I've quoted the figures. Let's not debate about this.
And you would, Kweku, you more particularly will understand the NDC, because we have heard some people in government, particularly Gideon Bwako, suggest that the NDC has been caught before by the IMF in, dealing with wrong figures and then allegedly paying penalties. There's no proof that the NDC was made to pay any penalties.
So what is the gross figure for 2018?
And so the question now is that there's a fear by government.
Yes.
There's a certain percentage of GDP you are not supposed to cross. Yes. So you are deliberately dealing with the economic statement in a manner to avoid the implications of fiscal discipline.
If you did that, if you hit figures like that, as we did in 1999 and 2000, if you did that, you pay the penalty as we did in 2001. We paid the penalty for misreporting in 2009, 1919, and then 2000, under the previous Rawlings administration. So if you did that, that's punishment. But that is not what has happened. I've just explained, and I'm quoting them. The figures are wrong. They just did the wrong thing. Somebody ought to advise them not to do that again.
We have barely 3 minutes to go.
Yes. And then 2, it is not just that. In addition to that, the IMF statement you refer to, all right? The statement itself states that overall balance, negative 7.5. Overall balance excluding financial and energy sector related costs. Then they quote negative 4.7. The 4.5 here is for the 3 quarters. If you look at end year, we reported in 4.8. The IMF is reporting 4.7. So there's no issue about you hiding figures. The way we did in 2000, that would warrant the kind of penalty.
What is the explanation? What's the explanation for the exclusion of the fiscal financial sector payment?
He explained
the what do you call it? The petroleum
he explained
energy sector payment.
He explained it. You see, you put these figures out to show a government's expenditure behavior against its revenue. Now, if you have such unanticipated expenditures, you want to isolate that and reflect that for the purposes of those who want to do business in your economy. This is not.
All right.
So it has been reported in the budget.
All right.
Oh, I'm saying that.
I'm sorry, but this all time will allow us.
Samson,
yes.
But answer one question.
Yes, ask that question and let's close.
What is your net reserve in terms of import cover for 2018?
Well, I have not the net.
You haven't checked. You said they are lying.
But they didn't.
You haven't checked.
They didn't talk about.
Oh, please. It's here. See.
Oh.
You haven't checked, and yet you said they are lying.
They didn't talk about net gross.
No, I just mentioned it. I'm saying that there's a discrepancy between the net. in 2018.
But John,
and by the way, this is the 2020 budget.
Okay.
Everything about 2018 is reported here. And yet you say the 2020 budget does not report 2018.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm sure that the matter has been dealt with succinctly and in a comprehensively succinct manner, particularly from the perspective of the World IMF. My guests have been Kweku Kwarteng, MP of Boase West and Deputy Minister of Finance, John Abdullahi Jinapor, MP, Yape Kusogu, and Member Finance, Mines and Energy Committees of Parliament. Earlier, we spoke to Nana Kofi Kwache, who is a research fellow with the New York's University School of Global Public Health. He's also with the NDC's COVID-19 team. Dr. John Amwesi of the KCCR Kumasi, and also Prosper Bunny, Chairman NDC's Technical COVID-19 team. And of course, Gideon Bwako. I'm Samson Ladi Anyenini. Have a good afternoon. Please take care.